So I have spent my life in the world of finance, and many of you have not. So I decided that I would keep my presentation very short. So thank you very much. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to keep it light and fun, but basically to tell you the simple story, I have 5 nieces, and when they turned 18, they had asked me the question of, how could I get rich in the stock market or make money in the stock market? And so I sat them down and I took notes and I did all that, and I eventually helped them. By the time they were turning 18, as each one of them got to that point, I gave them each $3,000 and I helped them set up their investment accounts. The key thing about my nieces is that not one of them studied finance. In fact, they're not interested in finance. In fact, they do not care about the stock market. They would not go home and turn on a TV and look at the stock market. So it was a particular challenge for me to come up with this way of talking to them that would be a simple way. And so I summarized that in the book that's called How to Start Building Your Wealth Investing in the Stock Market. I wrote it for my nieces. Today I'm going to talk to you about what I've learned from my podcast, and I'll introduce you to that. But ultimately, the key thing for all of us is that, you may not like cooking, but you're still responsible for healthy eating. And you will pay the price later in your life if you don't take that responsibility. So part of what I like to think about is how do we help people who really are not interested in the stock market to get themselves eating healthy in that way. So that's the book, and I also have an online course, and I'm relaunching that. So I've got a special, if anybody is interested in doing that course, see me. Basically what I've got is that if you go to myworstinvestmentever.com, there's a little button right here that says send voicemail. And you'll see it at the bottom of your PDF, so you don't have to do it now. But at the bottom of your PDF, there's a link. Just go to that link, send a voicemail, leave a voicemail, introduce yourself, and you'll have to put your email in. And then I'll respond, and then maybe we could get a group of people to do it together. So 6 ways to lose your money. That's what I'm going to tell you about, and 6 strategies to win, because ultimately you will lose your money. Just the question is, how much of your money will you lose? So on Friday, April 13th, 2018, at 3:32 p.m., I wrote the following message. I want to teach my university students how to reduce investment risk to help them avoid the common mistakes they would likely make in investing. I am referring to all kinds of investments they could make in life, like investing in stocks, unlisted businesses, startups, real estate, relationships. Anybody ever had a bad investment in a relationship? Yeah. So, can you help me by answering this question? What was your worst investment, and what did you learn from it? The answer can be anonymous. I don't need to know the exact detail of the investment I just want to know the story. Also, I'll not use your name. Have an awesome day. That was an email I sent out to the people that I know, on my friends, people I work with. How many written stories, written emails back do you think that I got? Well, the truth of that matter is that people don't write that much anymore. People don't email that much anymore. People don't respond. Look at all the emails. How many emails did you respond to today? Well, the answer is I got 500 emails back. That was April 2018. By July 2018, I had launched my podcast based on these stories. So if anybody here wants to launch a podcast, see me after the event. I've got a lot of experience of mistakes I made. Since then, I have published more than 150 interviews with people, and maybe the next one would be you. So, You see, everyone has a story of loss. Even my 81-year-old mother right here, who came today. There's Mom. Yay! So when I talked to her, she told me, I'll tell you our worst investment ever. It was your father. He did an investment in a company, right? My dad, invested. He wanted to invest in one of Sharon's husbands at the time, John's, right? So in a kind of a family relationship. And how much did you lose in that?
I don't know, but we lost it all.
Pretty much all. So everybody has a story. There's Mom, there's us at the park, and there's us at home. So today, I would like to welcome you to the show. The show is called MyWorstInvestmentEver.com. There you go. So, oops. I got to put on my radio voice. I got to remember that. Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to My Worst Investment Ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risks. But to win big, you've got to reduce it. My name is Andrew Stotz from A. Stotz Investment Research. And today, I will present the stories told by 6 brave guests on the show. And I say brave because the majority of people say, no, I would rather not be on your show talking about my losses. So, before we get started, why do I say brave? Well, nearly 99% of the people I ask, which means I've asked a lot of people, say they'd prefer not to talk about it. In fact, people love to talk about their winners. Hey, I bought this stock and it went up. I bought Amazon. I bought this. I bought that. So, but these brave souls have turned their biggest losers into winners by exploring the mistakes they made and passing that learning on to you today. So, here comes my first question. And I want you to answer it. Are you ready to rock? Yes. All right. One more time. Are you ready to rock? Yes. That's the first question. You've already passed the first question in the podcast. So, in this podcast, my goal is to help people understand that there's 3 levels of investing that you want to think about. The first is create. That's where we create our wealth. Some people create it through business. Some people create it through their salary. And they save money over time, and they have a lot lower costs than they do of what they make. The next thing is to grow. The stock market is not to get rich. The stock market is to grow your wealth. And today, we're going to learn about protecting the wealth. So you've got a list here, and I'm going to talk about the first mistake. I looked at all the different stories that I've been given, and I categorized it. Seeing as I'm an analyst, I analyzed it, and I went through every single one, and I looked at what is the most common, and this is the number 1 most common mistake. But I don't want to tell you about this mistake, about fail to do their own research, because it would be a bit boring. So I'm going to let one of my guests do that, Josiah Smelser. And Josiah, basically, he got excited to start his new business. And he was going to be buying houses and flipping them, fixing them up, and then flipping them. And basically, he then wanted to put that profit into buying more properties, maybe renting those out. So his first mistake was that he bought a piece of property, a house, that was far away from the city center. Just before he bought the house, he arrived to find water pouring through the ceiling. Now, any smart person at that point would probably run away, which is actually what he did. He told the seller, I'm backing out of this deal. So after some weeks, the seller eventually dropped the price, so he came back. He came back and he decided to buy that house at a lower price. Now, his second mistake that he made, and this was really the major mistake, is that he didn't get a property inspection. In other words, he didn't do the research. And it's not enough to do the research on your own. In the case of property, you really need to get outside inspectors. So, first thing, he found there was termite damage to the house. So he had to fix that. Then, he found these massive holes that he didn't notice in the backyard, all over the backyard. So he had to call in pest control to try to figure out what this was. And it was armadillos. So basically, he had to get pest control, pay them to trap these armadillos and then take them out to the wild. So you could imagine a few weeks of getting all these armadillos out. And then he found some rotten wood that he had to repair, which he should have inspected before he bought the house. And now the costs were rising. After he got rid of the armadillos, the house was ready for the first potential buyer. And when they arrived, there was a sea of hornets all around the house. You can listen to the story on the podcast, but no need to do it now. Turns out armadillos live under the ground and hornets live under the ground, and the armadillos were eating the hornets. Once the armadillos were gone, the hornets came out. So he had to get pest control out, spend more money for that. Now, at month 5, he finally gets an offer. And the new buyer hired an inspector. The new buyer did what he didn't do. Oh, here comes trouble. You can just imagine. Inspector found 30 things that needed to be fixed. He's almost 6 months into this project. There's nothing he can do. He has to fix them all. So he fixes all 30 of these items. Josiah is really a dedicated guy, and his story, it will inspire you first to get an inspection and do your research, but more importantly, to push on when you face challenges. Next, the buyer sent an appraiser who identified another 15 items that needed fixing. He had no choice. He's so far along now, he had to fix it. Then, a week before the final sale, the buyer walked through the house and found 6 items that needed fixing, including water damage to the basement, which meant that they had to repair the foundation of the house, which would have been found by an inspector. He fixed all 6 items, including the big one, the foundation of the house. Uh-oh, a little bit poopy. My friend put in these poopy emojis. Well, he didn't know that there was a septic tank in the back of the house that was under the ground for sewage, and he had to clean that out and remove it, replace it. So finally, the day of closing came. He had overcome every obstacle, but just hours before the sale, there was a fireplace repairman who was up in the fireplace, working around, cleaning out the fireplace, and he turned the vacuum, instead of vacuuming, he turned it reverse so it was blowing out, and it blew black soot all into the living room. 3 hours before it's time to sell this house. So basically, they had to quickly actually paint the walls. You couldn't scrub it off the walls, all this black soot. So they were painting the walls, he was sweeping up below, and eventually the buyer came in. He sold the house. Woo! So what can we learn? His story is a case study first in opportunity costs. He lost a lot of time. And he also lost about $20,000 on the deal. But basically, it's the idea of not doing your research. The losses that you can make are massive. So I'm going to continue on because I want to get to the next one. So how do we offset this number one way to lose money? What we want to do is write down and research an investment and do your research. If you're buying a house, obviously hire an inspector. If you're doing something related to business, maybe hire an expert that can help you in that. Something related to finance, talk to someone before you do it. So now, the second most common risk is fail to properly assess and manage risk. Hey, it's the same thing in the fitness world. We're about a month away from a time that the fitness gyms all around the world are going to be swamped with people, right? Their New Year's resolution.
January 1st.
Yes. They're probably never going to come back. Some of you guys look very fit, so I suppose you'll be there. And you'll be there in February, March, and April. But I don't know the statistics to this, but I would imagine that a large number of them will injure themselves within the first probably 3 to 5 times that they're at the gym. And it could actually injure themselves in a way that would prevent them from exercising properly, maybe for the rest of their life. The risks are very high at the gym. Well, the same thing is true with investing. Most people fail to assess the risk, but also they fail to manage it. I have someone, they told me, I found this really great stock, and I did my research, Andrew, and I assessed the risk on it, and I put all my money in it. That's the second part, which is managing your risk. You've got to manage it carefully. So let me tell you about Jeremy Newsom. Jeremy's from Canada. And basically, he saw the movie Forrest Gump. And Forrest Gump said, basically, he got rich by investing in Apple. So he wanted to. At 21, he invested with his dad. His dad gave him some money, and he invested in silver. He asked his dad, and his dad would basically match his money. But unfortunately, they bought silver just before the peak. Had been following it for a long time. As he said on the podcast, 15 minutes before the peak. He's like, I was the last buyer at the top of the market. To make matters worse, because he invested through a derivative instrument, not actually buying the silver, but buying a derivative instrument of the silver, that derivative interest meant he lost 100% of his money. So he didn't properly manage risk, and he was a young guy, he didn't know. Just like that person going into the gym and causing himself a lifetime injury of a shoulder, of a knee. Sounds like they need to come here to figure out how to fix that. So, 100% loss on the second biggest trade of his life, but where did he get the money to do this trade?
Father.
From his father. His father gave the money. Turns out, what he shared next was what was really painful. He got the money from his father. It turns out what he lost was 100% of his father's retirement savings, and it makes me almost cry to think about the damage that he caused in that situation. And this is why I like my podcast, because I can interview anybody that's had loss. And loss is painful. And that's why I say that they're brave people to bring out the pains that they went through. And it's through these pains that we can really learn. Now, I'm going to try to move a little bit faster here so I don't take too much of your time. So what I'm going to do is just skip through this, and I'm going to get straight to the point is you need to review the work, the investments that you've done, mistakes that you've made. If you're trading in the market, you have to know that you may get it right one time, but all it takes is one big mistake, and you can blow out that elbow, or you can lose that money. And so, what strategy do we have to win to offset this? You want to rank the risks of what you're doing by probability and severity, and then create a risk reduction plan. What's the possibility that this could happen? And if it happens, how painful will it be? This type of assessment, or just forget about that, just write down the risks. Most people never even write it down. So let's continue on. And let's talk about the third most common way that people lose money and lose lots of things is driven by emotion or flawed thinking. Do you ever make an emotional decision? And you look back and go, oh. I think back, Mom, to my first girlfriend, Nina. And somebody asked me, why did you, after I explained how that relationship really crashed and burned. And she said, why did you, why were you in a relationship with Nina? I said, because she liked me. It's like, that was good enough for me. I was 20-something, I thought, a woman likes me? I was driven by emotion and flawed thinking. And in the world of finance, there's many opportunities to make cognitive mistakes. So let me introduce you to Jim Warporn, who's from Thailand. And basically, Jim had sold his portfolio of US stocks, and he had a big gain. He made a lot of money. And he became obsessed with the idea of investing in volatility, how much the stock market is going up and down. If the stock market's moving a lot, you can make money in volatility. If the stock market's kind of moving a little bit, you don't make money in volatility. So it's a complex thing, but he did his research. He did not make the mistake of not doing his research. And through this, he figured out his way, and he invested 50% of his money into this volatility through an instrument called an ETN. After 4 months, his investment immediately fell by 40%. That's pretty tough right there. He did more research and decided to put the other half of his money in. So he proceeded to lose the first 50% And then basically he eventually gave up on his idea. And by the end, he had lost 70% of the money that he had gained after this great investment that he had made. Ouch. Think about all of your hard work, the things that you have gained in money and assets and those types of things. You don't want to lose them like this. So what can we learn? What he did that was right was he started with a good investment plan. He did his research that supported his idea. And he kept on reading and learning, but only his side of the story. And it's so hard to listen to other sides of the story, particularly when we're passionate about our side of the story. So he was stuck to this, and he bet even though basically it was looking bad. He ignored the market and all those things. We call this the concept of overconfidence bias. No matter how much you know or how successful you've been in the past, the fact is that particularly in the stock market, which is a very, very complex system of many different people and many institutions in it, that we have to be very careful not to be overconfident. Also, we don't want to pick just the information that supports our ideas. Listen to the market. So how do we overcome this? Well, we explore, and we list opposing views. I challenge you today, from today forward, the next big idea you have, find the anti-idea to that. What is against that? And try to explore that. And use that as a tool to try to break through the emotion and the flawed thinking. So now, let's talk about the next one, misplaced trust. I want to talk to you about Azran. He's from Malaysia, and he's a pretty famous guy. He went from 0 to $1 billion IPO. And basically, he started AirAsia X, and he took it from a startup to $1 billion US in revenue, 2,500 stacks, and an IPO in just a very short amount of time, 6 years. His boss, Tony Fernandez, the famous AirAsia chief, believed that giving employees or CEOs executive stock options were not a good idea. He wanted his management team to own the shares. So if it went down, they suffer. And if it goes up, they do well. So he convinced him to invest his wealth. So Azran gathered all his wealth. He wasn't rich like Tony Fernandez, so he gathered all of his wealth. But Tony Fernandez basically said it wasn't enough. So he helped him to borrow more money. And he trusted him, and he listened to that. To this day, Azran still believes in this concept of having skin in the game. But he also learned a very important lesson about don't trust other people sometimes. But in this case, he was definitely overexposed to this one asset, the airline. And prior to the IPO, he followed his investment banker's advice, and that's an important lesson. Never listen to investment bankers, because they make money no matter what you do. If you lose it, they're going to make it. If you make it, they're going to make it. And they convinced him to borrow more money, give his shares that he had, borrow more money so that it looks really great. Like, wow, the CEO is buying into this company, right? So it all worked out. Because at the time of IPO, he earned 6 times his money. Fantastic. Okay, so this is a story of winning. No, it gets worse on paper. But paper winnings are not real winnings. So by 2014, the management team had thoughtfully but aggressively invested all of the IPO money to double the capacity of the planes, the number of planes. And remember that this company was making a bet with China and Australia. They were trying to do long haul, low cost. And so they were very, very exposed. And tragedy struck. There was 3 airline disasters and many lives lost in 2014. MH370, MH17, and then his own airline, AirAsia in Indonesia. All this tragedy brought AirAsia X to a loss, and eventually Azran resigned. In the end, he suffered a personal 7-digit US dollar cash loss. The management team failed to factor in the risks, but what I would say is that the tragedies were also something that you can never predict everything. And he trusted the advice of his mentor, plus he trusted the advice of the investment bankers. So you have to be careful about the advice that you're being given. And so, what can we learn? avoid or minimize personal debt. If you're in personal debt, try to reduce it as fast as you can. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't borrow if you can get, let's say, a good low interest rate loan for buying a house or something, but generally that's the idea. And be very careful about what people say at banks and the like. Now, so get to know the person you're investing with. Trust only develops over time. Number 5, I'm going to go through this one quickly. Failed to monitor their investment. And this is a guy named David Stein in America, a very, very experienced investor. And he decided that he wanted to become an investor, a trader in the stock market. If you've seen it on the internet, buy Forex, trade in these different assets. This is almost all a scam online. And even this guy, who's super smart, had been a financial guy all of his career, realized that it took more than he had to be able to trade. Because when you're trading Forex and when you're trading in the markets like this type of stuff, you're trading against the banks, right? So I'm going to skip through and just get to this point. Don't be a trader. If somebody comes up to you and go, hey, I'm going to take this course on trading. Anybody ever hear any of that? If you hear that, remember my words today. It's a scam. So if you must, start off with a very, very small amount of money and try to keep it small, because trading is speculation. So follow a regular, predetermined monitoring process of what you're doing. The last one, and I'm going to wrap up here, is invested in a startup company. This is like all mistakes all into one. Now, I'm not saying don't invest in a startup company. I'm telling you that my guests have told me that investing in a startup company is where they lost serious money. So I want to introduce you to Viola Llewellyn. And she and her business partner, Marvin Cole, the two of them came up with an idea. They wanted to create the first peer-to-peer lender to help African SMEs gain access to capital. And she mapped out their dream, and in 2013 successfully convinced friends and family she got their money. They were off to the races. She went to a big event, a conference, and she convinced many people about her idea. But most importantly is that she basically, before the event, she tried to get everybody she could interested in this. She did a good job with that, and the responses were fantastic. And eventually she signed with one company that was going to give her money, and they were going to help her finance this business. It was a remarkable success. Party time. Well, all glamour. But she knew only the good side of the story of the people that she was getting the money from. She didn't know what was going on. And she received a tiny amount of equity injection initially, and they were told that she's going to get this 12 million later. So she was really off to the races, and with that excitement, she went out to the African SMEs telling them money is coming. It's in the bag. And she was promoting her company. She had billboards, many things out there. She was a superstar, a new hero in the world of B2B business lending. Then it came time for the 12 million to come into the account, and what she said is, she asked, where's the money? Crickets. So, where's the money? We're trying to work some things out. Where's the money? She started to see people leaving their jobs at this company. Where's the money? The firm slowed down the flow of documents, and basically, over time, they started to change the interest rates in the terms and agreements, and over time, the firm put tougher clauses on documentation, and she had all that demand from the SMEs in Africa that were really, that lifeline was what she was providing. Eventually, she had to accept that the money wasn't coming. And it meant that she couldn't provide this funding. She had to scramble. She was making excuses. When you listen to her speak on the podcast, you know, she is a passionate woman, and she just realized that her whole reputation was on the line. She said her stomach was in knots every night. Her pride shrunk to a thumbnail. Her husband was having to work extra, and they used up all their retirement savings. So she had to walk through the horror of admitting failure and facing the demons in her head that were shouting. Anybody have demons in their head? Oh yeah. Everybody has those, right? Everybody has those. African businesses are a failure. Black people can't manage business. Women can't manage business. These were the things that were going on in her head. Microfinance doesn't work. She also had to face those loyal friends and family that put money with her originally. She had to fight all of this and try to rescue her pride, and all of her dreams were spinning out of control. The thing about loss is it's painful. So you can see it's terrifying, embarrassing. So what can we learn from Viola? Through all of this, her business partnership with Marvin stayed together. She learned that the strength of an investment relationship is how well you recover during the hard times. The first capital you raise should be the beginning of the next capital that you raise. This is because what she calls the startup paradox. When a company needs money, they can't get it. And when they don't need it, it's everywhere. So, never stop raising capital if you have a startup company. And also, some of the other things, people can tolerate and forgive a bad outcome if you're straight with them, and she is a very straight, impressive woman. Build trust with all the stakeholders and transparency throughout a crisis. If you're going through that, people will appreciate that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the origin story of how Viola and Marvin pivoted into their new, now successful business, Ovamba, which provides capital to businesses in Africa and emerging markets. So how do we offset this one? We start from this reality. You're likely to lose everything in a startup. You could get rich, but you're likely to lose everything. So today, I've shown you 6 ways that you are likely to lose your money, and I've given you 6 strategies to win. Write down your research, write down the risks, find opposing views, get to know the people that you're investing in because trust only builds over time, follow a regular process and monitor it, and start with the reality that you're likely to lose everything. So I want to thank you very much for having me today.